Hi, and welcome back to another tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to run unconstrained PMF. For this, we go to the Run tab in the SoFi main panel. Before defining the model parameters and run PMF, we have to define the solver and also create the file in which the results should be stored in. For the ME2 solver, we simply have to define the path to the ME2 executables. We do this by clicking here on Select and then select the main ME2 engine folder. With the ME2 solver, you have the option to use multiple cores, which allows you to run PMF in parallel. You can increase the number of cores that should be used here. But pay attention that if you use all cores, your computer might be blocked and cannot be used for anything else. Maybe one comment on running PMF in parallel. Initiating the PMF calculation has to be done for each core separately and might take a while. So it can be that if you have PMF calculations that are faster than the initiation process, that not all cores will be used and PMF in the end is not actually run in parallel. So next we have to create the HDF file in which SoFi will store the results in. For this, we simply type in here the name of our file. Hitting enter will let you know that SoFi has created the file in the ME2 engine folder. If you made a typo or you think you don't want the file, you can click here on delete file. Just be aware that you will remove the file permanently and you cannot restore it from the bin. Now that we set up the file and the solver, let's continue with defining the model parameters. For this, let's open up the orange panel. We have here a few steps that we have to go through. First of all, we have to define the number of factors. With SoFi, you can run PMF over a number of different factors. So therefore, you have to define a starting factor and an ending factor. So for example, you want to run PMF over, let's say, 4 to 8 factors. You put in here starting factor 4, ending factor 8. You can also define here the number of PMF calls. At the moment, SoFi will run PMF over 4 factors, 5 factors, 6 factors, 7 factors, and 8 factors. If you increase the number of PMF calls, SoFi will run each factor number multiple times. So for example, in this case, SoFi will run 4 factors 4 times, 5 factors 4 times, 6 factors 4 times, and so on. Next, we have to make sure that there are no empty cells in the input matrix. Although we removed completely empty rows and columns when we initialize the PMF input, there can still be single cells that contain no data. Similar as during the initialization process, one needs to define a value for missing data. This we can do here. So on the top, you can define a value that represents the missing data in your dataset. What SoFi will do when I hit continue here is to replace all nuns, in this case, with a value of -100. This is so because we have here a definition that all data lower than -99 will not be considered by the ME2 solver. It will also replace the corresponding errors with 10 times the highest error that is found in the dataset. So if we hit continue, SoFi quickly will do the check and will let you know whether it found some missing data in your dataset or not. Same as for the initialization process, this process here is additive. So you have different values for missing data. You can just repeat this process. It's just very important to not skip this part here, because if you have any missing data in your input data, the ME2 solver will not run. With this, you could start running PMF, but we do recommend to take advantage of the downweighting options that we have down here. Downweighting means that each variable is giving a certain weight based on its signal to noise ratio. This is done so that noisy variables, for example, do not drive the PMF solution. We do have a few options on how to apply the weight factor. The recommended way is to use a step function based on the average signal to noise ratio. The average signal to noise ratio means that for each variable, there is a signal to noise ratio calculated over the whole dataset. So if we inspect the signal to noise plot, we see here now that each variable has one signal to noise ratio. The step function was proposed by Pentipatro years ago, and it means that variables with a signal to noise smaller than 2 are classified as weak variables, and they're downweighted by a factor of 2. Variables with a signal to noise ratio smaller than 0.2 are considered bad variables, and they're downweighted by a factor of 10. The threshold values as well as the weight values can be updated, but these are the default values that have been systematically tested. To apply the weight factors now, just click on the button Apply Weight Factor here. SoFi will apply them to the corresponding entries, and will also update this little graph here where you can see which variable has been weighted with which factor. To inspect it more closely, you can also pop this table. We also have a few more options. Let me just undo what I just did. But let me tell you that those options have not been systematically tested yet. We do have an option here to not use a step function, but rather a more continuous function, which is 1 over the signal to noise. But in this, keep in mind that all variables will be applied a weight factor. We also have the option not just use the average signal to noise, but a cell-wise signal to noise. Let me show you this. So if you inspect the signal to noise plot now, you will see that you have now a signal to noise ratio for each variable at each time point. This can be useful if you have, for example, data from different stations where you measure very different concentrations and have huge differences in the signal to noise. So let me go back to the default values that have been systematically tested. Now that you applied your weight factor, you can start running PMF. For this, you click here on Start Runs. And SoFi will now let you know how many PMF runs it is about to start. We have here 20 PMF runs because we run from 4 to 8 factors with 4 repetitions for each factor. If you want to proceed, just click yes. And with this, you successfully started your first PMF run. I hope you found this tutorial informative and helpful. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more tutorials on PMF and SoFi. Thank you for watching this tutorial and hope to see you soon.